this is my stepping stone into being strong and to understanding that food is fuel and to knowing that like my macros are my macros and I am going to eat them because they make me feel good, they make me look good. And I think you really helped me mentally in that aspect.
Hey guys, I'm here with Anna, and today we're going to kind of talk everything eating disorder. Um, I remember when we spoke on the phone that this was one of the big things that we wanted to prevent behavior of. And then you had told me, on the phone that you had already kind of went through some tough stuff growing up. So tell us a little bit about that, and then we can go in how competing actually kind of helped you.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed anorexic my junior year of high school. And I would say this kind of stemmed from the aspect that, like, from the root of me moving initially from Portland, Oregon, because I was living there for 16 years, then picked up, left all my family and friends for good reasons. My family, my dad's work got transferred over this way. So we were like, okay, we have to make this move. It's a great opportunity. He's originally like went to college here regardless. But coming to a state knowing absolutely nobody in the middle of the summer kind of gets you like going in your head about like everything you can't do essentially because you're by yourself. So for me, like I've always been an athlete. So picking up something that I thought like I can control was always like in the forefront of my mind. So I was always an athlete. I ran soccer and I ran cross country. So coming here, I was just like training like crazy. I was just like training because I was like, well, that's the only thing that I can do that makes me feel better. That's the only thing that I can do that controls like myself and my mental and me not being sad about leaving. And that comes along with my nutrition aspect too, because like I also wanted to make a statement in my coaches' minds and like make them known who I am. Like I wanted to be somebody when I moved here, and that's really hard when you're like moving in the midst of your adolescence. Like you are in high school, moving to a different state, starting college, don't know anybody. It's like a whirlwind of like different things. So that's where my nutrition came in. And then I was like, okay, well, the less I eat, the faster I run. And the faster I run, the better like time trials I'm going to run. And then my coaches are going to know who I am because on cross country, there's like 500, 600 kids. Like there's no way they're going to know absolutely everybody at that practice. So for me, that is when I developed my eating disorder. And I do think it was kind of rooted as like environmentally when I was growing up from my own like, experiences at school. And like I was always asking my parents, like, am I fat? Am I fat? And so I do think there's like some sort of like theories that root back to having it in your head like when you're younger. But I do think it like stemmed and stimulated itself in high school through that move and then into college. So that was like really difficult for me because I was eating less than 500 calories a day. And I was like an absolute twig. And I remember there was a point in time where I shifted and I was like, okay, I really need to get strong because everybody was like coming up to me, like grabbing my hand. Are you okay? Are you okay? It was not only stressing myself out anymore, but it was stressing out my family as well. And that's when I started going to the gym and I started to like really research weight training, resistance training. And I was like, okay, well, I always feel fatigued. So I need to somehow change my food to match the style. So I remember coming to you and I was literally like, I thought I had entered a bulk in a reverse phase. I'm pretty sure I was eating like 150 carb and I was eating 30 fat still and 140 protein at the max. And I'm like, oh, I bulked. And I remember coming to you talking about how I wanted to enter a prep. And you specifically said, like, we want to prevent any like eating disorders. And I opened up to you about my anorexia. And like, I just want to hear like your thoughts on that, on what you thought in that moment when I told you.
Yeah, so when I heard that, it's sometimes not surprising. What women grow up with the false standards that seem to be what the norm of society is really sad. And that's something I'll never understand as a guy, because let's face it, a lot of things are in. Like, I could be a lumberjack, assume a
Yeah.
wrestler. Like, there's just a lot of there's not a whole lot of pressure to
Right.
like, as a male, like, even looking like a WWE wrestler, like, I didn't feel pulled to look like that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
nor did any of my friends.
Right.
But however, I did find it intriguing in myself, and that's kind of what drew me into
Mhm.
bodybuilding slightly. I think was like, like WWF wrestling, like that's what it was called back in the day when I was a kid, and that made me fascinated with muscles, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
With women, there's also um I just think that pressure to kind of seek visual perfection. So I do hear a lot of girls have tendencies, but I was surprised at your age that you were very open about it,
Yeah.
because from talking to you, I knew, I was like, man, this, you told me your macros, and I was like, it's gonna be hard to get her to raise her food, but I have a gentle hand with that. Granted, should you have been eating 150 carbs, then probably not. You should have been eating more. But however, if I told you eat 300 right out the gates, you're probably not going to do that.
I
So
would,
it's meeting clients where they are, nudging you from a comfortable place to maybe a slightly uncomfortable one. And then you had mentioned something about control with eating disorders. I think
right.
that's a huge component, is
Right.
when people do develop things like anorexia, it does come from a control aspect. Luckily, it sounds like your family was kind of concerned, and you're definitely very much a family person. Shame
Mhm.
and guilt are two different things, but you experience both of those when your family starts asking questions. So that probably pushed you into the, all right, I need to find a different way. I
Absolutely.
need to kind of give up control. But
Mhm.
yet, when you see like a physique competition, that does keep it in your control, right? But now you're like, well, I don't know how to do this
Right.
necessarily. So I'm going to kind of give up some control to have someone help me reach this goal, which is
Absolutely.
definitely healthier than what I'm currently doing now.
And that was a really good way to put it, because like with my family, I was running like before school in the morning, during school, to skip lunch, and after school, and like literally no meals in between. So like you said, it's more of a control thing. Family begins to become concerned. And segueing into like how the macros and like bodybuilding like helped me step out of that completely, is like initially, yes, I would say I was a lot more still like very controlled, but obviously I was in a prep, so that was going to be the point regardless. But I had the realization during my prep that I was eating so much more food and losing weight. And
Mhm.
I was eating, and I was doing way less cardio and I was losing weight. And I was like, okay. And I feel like I looked better and I felt stronger. And so in that entering the off season after my 2018 season, I realized, okay, like, wow, I need to enjoy life a little bit because I haven't had a single dessert in 4 years. And so I was like, this is my stepping stone into being strong and to understanding that food is fuel, and to knowing that like my macros are my macros and I am going to eat them because they make me feel good, they make me look good. And I think you really helped me mentally in that aspect. But like, that's the thing. I feel like everybody who goes through something like this, not necessarily that they need more control, because that could make somebody go the opposite direction as well, but
Mhm.
it makes them realize that you can indulge a little bit and you could still have the physique you want, and you could still control and still have it all like in front of you. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
That stuff goes hard too, because when you're experiencing transitioning from being what we would say is relatively comfortable, being leaner,
Mhm.
there's trauma, there's you kind of emotionally have a lot of family members that
Yeah.
live inside of
Yeah.
you. So,
Yeah.
when you're bulking and you came from like that eating disorder, anorexia side, you always have that
Mhm.
one family member that's saying you're getting fat or you're, you know, um,
Oh,
don't eat
yep,
anymore.
absolutely.
And understanding that food is fuel kind of quiets that family member. And you have other family members too that live inside of you that cheer you up. It just that traumatic one always
Yeah.
seems to be the loudest. So it just
Yeah.
takes time to gain trust with the process, and it kind
Mhm.
of quiets that
Yeah.
traumatic family member up that kind of keeps saying, hey, like, we're worried about you getting fat, or and it really does take the time, the trials and tribulations to, be brave and do what you did and kind of let go of control to, you know, um,
Yeah.
move forward.
100%. And this also kind of segues into like the binge eating post show. And I
Yes.
wanted to hear kind of your thoughts on how you like set up a client or a competitor to prevent that, and like if they open up to you about that, like how do you go about it?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways, and a couple things that come to mind. The first is just explaining that likely your metabolic rate's slower than it's ever been. So anything you eat post show,
Yeah.
you're really in a great state of storage because your body is close to not surviving, right? There's an energy crisis. Your body needs to store energy to survive at this point. So just the physiology, the psychology too. Once you start eating things that taste amazing, you start wanting to eat more of them.
Yeah.
So you
So
do
good.
have to be careful too. And then additionally, I think that we kind of have a responsibility of, I do see a lot of people making posts of things they're eating, and
Yeah.
I think one or two things is fine, but when you're like out on a food bender, there's
Every,
somebody out on the streets who's probably not eating.
I
So
know.
I always want to be respectful with food,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't order too much, don't, brag too much on social media because there's people who are out there not eating. But you really do have to approach that post-show meal eating carefully. You can actually get really bad edema if you eat too much
Yeah.
too. So that can
100.
be super dangerous. I've actually heard of girls who've gone to the hospital because
Wow.
they get a case so bad. So
Oh
there
my.
are some just physical
Yeah.
possible ramifications with that too. Also, where the eating post show gets really bad is when girls have a show 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later and they put on like 6 pounds. And it's like, well, if you can drop a pound or two a week, you're not going to end up being any better for your show. And those pounds are probably going to come off slower because the metabolic decline is just still happening because you're going to be in a deficit again.
Exactly. And at that point, you don't even want them to do that show if they're like eating and their like regimen is off because they're struggling at that point and they're pushing themselves to do something that they might not necessarily be ready for.
Yep.
Um, I know personally, like coming out of an anorexia and from not eating enough to going into a post show knowing that food, oh, there's so much of it. And
Yeah.
there's no longer, and I know this for a fact because I have competitors reach out through Insta or just messages for support because it's such a common thing in the industry, like post show binging. Because you're so stuck to a goal for so long, it's so easy, like afterwards, be like, oh, like it's just a week and then I'm back on track. But that week psychologically sets you back a couple because you're just thinking about food all the time. And then you have to go back to your strict, oh, I'm on prep mode. And that's something like I feel like we worked out a really good balance with. To prevent that. And also, I do think my eating disorder of anorexia triggers its way in there for that not to happen. I can't say I've never binged because we all have like post show. I do feel like I have one too many treats. And that could be like to some people, it could be um overeating, but like to me, I'm like that was a binge because I ate everything in my way.
Mhm.
But typically typically like the next day, like is when I'm like back on track because I feel like some advice to give people who are going off of a show, like you worked so hard for 16 weeks. Do not let like 6 extra donuts every single day like ruin that progress and like ruin that physique and like the aesthetics of like you working so hard.
Right.
And it's hard because like people look at this sport as like a disciplined mindset and a very disciplined sport, but the real discipline comes after the show. Like you can discipline yourself for a goal, but how much can you stay on track and make sure that goal is still in your vision even in the off season? And that's where I think discipline is tested, and like where you really come in a role and allow us to also have like those intuitive days, and like those days allow me honestly to just like step away from the scale. And I've learned this over time. At first it was hard to like not track, but it gave me the opportunity to step away from the scale and like go out with family and enjoy my food and be satisfied and be like, okay, I feel great. And like something I tell people is like, if you feel a binge coming on, like take a step back because you're aware, because you're in your head, you're just like, okay, should I eat this? Should I eat this? Take a step back and like literally just ask yourself, like, do I really need this right now? Or am I content with just having one and then it'll always be here tomorrow? So that way, like you don't go to bed feeling uncomfortable or feeling guilty, or you don't wake up the next morning feeling watery. And I know a lot of people overcompensate with cardio or cutting their food the next day. And I think that's a very vicious cycle.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think you nailed it there. Like it really comes down to, that drive and determination and discipline to just really stay on track afterwards. And sometimes you have to learn the hard way. And I have had clients who are like, I ate, 2 whole pizzas post show, and I had another show in a couple weeks, and I'll never do that
Wow.
again.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there is that act of learning. But I think this was a perfect one and really covers everything well.
Mhm.
So thank you guys, and we will see you on our next episode, which is going to shows.